Good evening.
Hello, hello. I
Good
was gonna
evening.
say hello again. Hey y'all.
Good evening. So, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome everyone who's joining us this evening. Thank you so much. It's been quite the Black Breastfeeding Week, and we've had quite a few programs and wonderful turnout. So, thank you for sticking with us through it all and joining us on this Thursday evening. So, I'd like to just briefly introduce myself and our panelists, and we'll get underway. So, my name is Kimberly Reyes, and I am the founder of All the Unexpected. I'm a mother to a toddler who was born at 26 weeks, and she is now 3 years old, and it's quite the journey so far. Um, Amongst other things, including being support for parents and families, my organization has also produced a series of documentaries talking about the history of Black women and medicine and motherhood. And we are going to show you a piece of that in a minute after I introduced our other two panelists to kind of set the stage and talk a little bit about the journey that we've taken as Black women in this country historically, what breastfeeding has meant to us as a community, how we've gotten to where we are today, and how we are going to move forward in the future, empowered and informed. And so, our first guest that is joining us this evening is Larissa Madison, and she is an international board certified lactation consultant and registered nurse from Evansville, Indiana, affectionately known as the Booby Whisperer. Larissa brings over 23 years of experience to her role, passionately supporting mothers, infants, and families. Currently working at a prominent birthing hospital in Southwest Indiana, Larissa's influence extends across outpatient care, teleconsultations, and community-driven lactation classes. She also teaches the maternal care practices course at Deaconess Women's Hospital in Newburgh, Indiana. A dedicated advocate for diversity and inclusion, her commitment to this cause is evident through her pioneering work in lactation support in the community. And so thank you, Larissa, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And our other panelist, last but certainly not least, is Mia Malcolm, and she is the program manager at St. Louis Children's Hospital, where she champions diversity and equity and inclusion in healthcare, drawing from her background as a fellow former NICU mom. Mia has serves as their advisor and facilitator, bridging gaps and guiding staff in education. She's co-authored publications on racism in neonatal care and contributes to committees amplifying parents and caregiver voices. Mia's enthusiasm and commitment to DEI springs from her unyielding commitment to leveling the healthcare playing field and dismantling biases that hinder marginalized communities' well-being. So, ladies, if I've forgotten anything, please do add to it. I look forward to a lively and robust discussion this evening. I think we've got a piece of the one of the documentaries that our organization has produced to kind of set the stage and to look at a bit of the history, which many of us will say, oh, we all know what happened, but quite a few people will say, wow, that's really what happened. And so we're going to take a look at that. And just for a little bit of housekeeping, the panelists will answer some questions that we've got for both of them and directed. And for those of you watching, feel free at any point throughout the discussion to throw a question in the chat. We will get back to you. If you would like us to not mention your name, if you'd like it to be an anonymous question, just say that and I will make sure to just sort of ask it from myself. And so thank you. And without further ado. Do we have the clip? Yes. If not, I can continue. I will yeah. Okay. So we may have run into a bit of technical difficulties, but nonetheless, I guess I will speak just very briefly on the history of Black women and breastfeeding. And so in the United States, we have a situation where from the time of slavery, Black women's labor was taken from the house and they were taken and separated from their children. And so often during slavery, serving as wet nurses to either the children of their masters or other people they were hired out to. And so for very many years, Black women were not able to nourish their own children, not encouraged to at the expense of their own family and in order to serve others. And so we saw this as kind of setting the stage in the country for women to be wet nurses. And then with the end of slavery, you had a situation where more often than not, historically, Black women were employed at higher rates, even while married, than sort of any other group in the country, meaning that very often after birth, they were separated from their families, if not very soon, immediately, if not very soon. Here we have the clip. So it's coming back. You should all be able to see it on your screen. So I will allow it to play. This assault on Black motherhood would continue. The 1940s saw a rise in the more widespread use of baby formula, and companies were quick to market their product to Black families. The combination of negative historical associations with being wet nurses and the reality of many Black women having to return to work very soon after giving birth made Black women prime targets for these advertising campaigns. By the 1950s, organizations such as La Leche League were formed. Their messages and campaigns were largely designed to encourage white women to breastfeed, while once again marginalizing Black motherhood. Images of white women breastfeeding their children began to be normalized, while one would only find an image of a woman of color doing so in the pages of National Geographic or the like. Okay, and so yeah, it's one of those scenarios where I think very often we were privy to a situation where Black women were not represented, right? And so when even in the sort of 1950s and 60s, as you see this push towards bringing women, because nursing rates and breastfeeding rates had reached an all-time low in the country as formula had come into play in the post-war period, you had a situation where Black women were not encouraged and still not represented. And if we fast forward to now, studies as recent as 2016 and 2018 showed that Black women were 9 times more likely than their white counterparts to be offered formula during their postpartum stay. And so that you've got a situation where we've created a perfect storm of historical legacy in terms of women feeling kind of marginalized and feeling like, well, we're not wet nurses anymore, right? And kind of not having the historical legacy of feeding, to formula companies having targeted women of color as their customer base, right? And a situation also where, because many women are employed in service sectors or other sectors that where nursing accommodations aren't made for them, that you've got a perfect storm where breastfeeding rates are at their lowest within our community. And so we're going to talk about sort of how we've got there. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions, and we're going to talk about how we sort of move forward informed, educated, and empowered to make a difference and to change some of those rates. And so I'm going to direct my first question to you, Larissa, and that would be, what do you think are some of the most common misconceptions that you've encountered while doing the education that you do, and how do you kind of combat those?
Sure. I'll make a couple of points. The first one is very personal. I was the first person to breastfeed in my family. My mom was born in 1941, just to put things into perspective. And she had an older sister, my Aunt Elsie, who had 5 children. My aunt developed breast cancer and passed away at the age of 30.
Mm.
So my mom really had it stuck in her head that breastfeeding led to breast cancer. And so when I come along at 20 years old wanting to nurse my daughter, I really didn't have, she was not the biggest cheerleader. At the time, I didn't really understand why, but later on, once um, I got into nursing school and learned more about lactation and got into the lactation world, I was able to kind of really then understand where she was coming from. It was coming from a place of hurt and grief, right? And it wasn't that, it was something that she didn't want me to do. And so then I was able to educate her, talk to her about it, and really a lot of other people in my family being the first one to do it. So, as far as like a myth, um, some of the older people in the Black community still believe some of the things from the past that they were not really educated on or knew much about. So that's a perspective from a personal standpoint. One thing that I did think about that we hear a lot, especially from the younger moms, is they don't want to breastfeed because it's going to make their boobs change or make their breasts sag and things like that. And so really just providing the education and giving them really the truth about their body changes during pregnancy. If you're pregnant and you're already worried about that, kind of too late, right? It's not just breastfeeding. So those are just a couple of points that I thought about in hearing that question.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting one. And just as a fun fact, nurse breastfeeding has actually been linked in numerous recent studies to decrease the risk of both breast and uterine cancer. And so
Absolutely.
it's one of those interesting things. And so, Mia, I wonder if you could piggyback on that question as we try to get Larissa back on camera so we can hear her, but we cannot see her. Have you encountered any kind of large misconceptions or
I don't know why I'm not on
misinformation?
camera.
Yeah, I think especially working in that NICU space and the neonatal, right, kind of space. And it's really I don't know, it's kind of tough because what we know, right, again, like studies and all the information show us that oftentimes in our NICU spaces, right, our Black babies are born smaller and they're born sicker than, their white counterparts and actually any other race, right? And so we also know that breast milk, that human milk is, this medicine. We know that it's medicine for our babies. We know that it helps with, growing that brain and brain function. We know that it can help to protect our kiddos from, certain sicknesses and things like that, and just boosting that immune system. And so a lot of times we will hear, the mom saying that, like, it's formula that does all of those things, right? And that formula is the healthiest option because that's what they got, and look at how well they've done. And oftentimes when we have moms who want to try to breastfeed, but then the other people in that village, right, will share kind of the stories that we're talking about, and like discouraging them or like scaring them, or and I would say, it's especially when you're a young mom, but like, I don't even know what that means to be a young mom, because like I was 25 and I felt like I'm so young. I don't know what I'm doing with this NICU baby. And it was, right. It was scary, but I think it's just leaning into the idea that like you get to make this choice. And if you want to try, like we're here to help you try. I also think it's really important to have, not for nothing, people that look like you in the space that can encourage you. And when people don't look like you in the space, that they have the historical context to understand what you're afraid of, right? And
Right.
kind of dispel some of those myths and, misinformation that is not meant to be harmful, but you're trying to talk people out of a historical trauma. And that's a tough thing to do if you don't have historical context.
Hmm. I think just continuing to sort of unpack the many layers of how we got here and how, as a community, we have so much pushback against doing this sort of most natural of things, right? And so just to kind of piggyback again, there is a can you tell us some situations where actually having this tailored support and actually having this village that supports you and all of the information to arm with has been successful for mothers?
Sure. Around here, probably around 2012, both hospitals decided to become baby friendly. So there was a really big kick and a lot of money, grant money being thrown at both hospitals. And that allowed me to have the opportunity to start the Wildflowers Lactation Support Group. And in that, I'm like, okay, where do we meet? How are we going to do this? I was also working at WIC at the time. And so I felt like I was in the perfect place to really draw in the women and moms and families that I wanted to connect with and help. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, where do we gather at one time on a consistent basis? Church. When do we gather? Well, there's typically Wednesday night Bible study, Wednesday night choir practice. And so there was a clinic actually attached to the church that we attend that really wasn't being utilized. And with the blessing of the pastor, he allowed me to use that clinic to do drop-in weight checks and consults there. And I made it during the time of Bible study and choir practice because the church was busy and that's where we were, right? There's friends and families kind of hanging out, waiting for one thing to end. And it allowed me at that time to even spread the word even more about why I was there and what I was doing. And slowly but surely, the ladies started coming in. I would do weight checks. In the back, I would come out. They had rearranged the waiting area. Next thing I know, somebody's bringing homemade guacamole and chips, and it turned into really they were supporting themselves. Like they became their group, their community, their village, all in that little space. And I can tell you to this day, a lot of those ladies are still forever friends, including, I mean, I love them just based on us creating that space and environment for them. So sometimes we have to think out of the box a little bit. Not everyone can go back to the suburbs, to the hospital to get weight checks, and not everyone can pay for consults. And so thinking outside the box and really going to where we are, keeping it at home and being available. That's one thing that I think about in reference to tailoring support for our Black and Brown moms.
Yeah, that's huge. Did you have anything to add to that, Mia?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback that. I think especially so like first of all, I wonder how many people who are watching felt like they had really great familial support. Because I think it's really interesting that we don't think about breastfeeding and the act of providing milk as like a community. Like we need the whole squad on board, right? And so I know like for us in the hospital, it is one of the things that we bring to even like our Father's First initiative meeting. We talk about breastfeeding and how you can be of support to your partner that's in the hospital. It is the greatest joy of my life whenever I walk into a room and like mom wants to talk to me, but like you see dad over at the sink kind of like washing the pumping parts. And I'm like, yes, you get in there and support. This is what we need, right? Or, you know, just having the people that come into your life, and even if they don't understand your decision, how can we offer them information to help get them on board? How can we help them understand how straining this is going to be on you and your mental health and all of those things, so that, you know, even if you don't understand why I want to breastfeed, I know that my mama cares that I'm getting enough rest. I know that my mama cares that her baby is not stressed out, right? And so how do we bring family on board about the things that they know that they get for sure, right? What I know that I get for sure is that this is going to be taxing on you, and that it, you know, it is going to interrupt your sleeping patterns, because getting up to feed a baby every 3 hours or getting up to pump every 3 hours. It is a chore. It is a choice to make. And if this is what you want to do, I might not get it, but I'm going to do what I can to support you. And I think that that's always like, constant education and not shaming people because, that sometimes is where we go, right? Try to use shame as a social justice tool, and it's not. You can't get me on board if you make me feel bad about it. I'm gonna go ahead and head out. I'm gonna respectfully stop talking to me, right? But how do we encourage people to like learn more, or like, here's the information I have. You get to make whatever decision you want to make, but here's the information I have. And I just want to share with you and know that I'm going to be here to support you, whatever that looks like. So we try to get it out in all the spaces and not just badgering, mom or that birthing parent with this idea of breastfeeding, but like, who's here supporting you? Why don't they come to the milk club and like learn about it? And what can we offer them? Like, it's always creating more space for more people to learn so that they can support.
I think that's a great piece. And I would wonder, Larissa, if someone is kind of hesitant to start having that conversation with their family or their support group or their partner, what would you say to them? So if a mom comes to you and you're saying, she says, I don't know how to tell him he can wash the parts, or I don't know, like, what would you be your advice to someone to say, how do you start talking to your village so they know what you need?
Sure. Really pre-delivery, right? Dropping little nuggets about their intentions, dropping little nuggets about the benefit of it for mom and baby, the cost savings. Sometimes that gets dad's ears a lot. And not just dad. I want to piggyback on what Mia said. We know that grandma, big mama, auntie, all our play cousins influence us and what we do. So we need to, or we should, invite everybody at the table and drop little nuggets here and there, pre-delivery. And of course, I work inpatient too, but allowing the support people to be involved in the care of mom and baby as well. It's a team effort. And sometimes I feel like we forget about that a lot as a society, right? Like, I would never expect a woman who had a hysterectomy to go home and take care of her 3 children and still do all the household chores. That's not what we tell them. So why are we telling or have the expectations that moms should be able to pick up as regular and do what they need to do? They need to heal as well. So it's a mindset change, and just giving people the tools. And it starts with planting a seed and going from there.
Yeah. Well, we've already got 2 great questions in the chat, so we might as well get to them and then we could sort of come back to our discussion. So the first is from Lee, and she says, I am a breastfeeding and pumping mom of an 8-month-old and will be going out of town and away from the baby for about 10 days. She'd like to know, how can I make sure that my milk supply doesn't decrease during this time? Yeah, Larissa, we're pointing at you.
Okay. No, it's cool. So again, we know that babies can remove milk from moms more efficiently than what a pump can, right? So if you are able to, I don't know what your environment's going to be like, but if you could still pump every 3 to 4 hours, I would imagine that your 8 or 9-month-old, they're not nursing at the breast every 3 hours, especially if you're away from baby at times when you're at work. Just being conscious of making sure that you have the time to be able to pump as frequently as you can while you're away from baby. It's almost kind of like going back to basics: breast massage, pumping consistently, not sleeping through the night. Those are some advice that I would give for a mom who's going to be away for 10 days. And don't freak out if the supply dips. That's totally normal. That should be an expectation. You just got to put a little bit more work into it in order to combat that. So I hope
Yeah,
that helps.
she added an additional sort of addendum, I guess, to her question, which was that she will be bringing the pumps with her and hopefully be able to pump 3 times a day because she'll actually be out of the country and also planning to dump the milk after pumping. Does that change the advice at all, or just?
No. If she and so 3 times during the day, we still have at night that we can get 1 or 2 in or so. And then wherever her environment is, pre-destination, I would inform them of the expectation that I need to be able to take some time off, step out of the room, do whatever I need to do in order to, 1, protect my milk supply and my health. Y'all don't want me getting sick way over there. So it's going to be for everybody's benefit. I hope that makes sense.
Would you recommend that she take something that smells like baby? Because I've heard that to be a thing. So in one of the onesies the baby's worn or something, is that a true thing? Because here, I don't know if I've heard misconceptions, so I'm curious.
Well, pictures. A lot of moms say they respond well to pictures when they're at work and away from baby. I have a coworker who has a device at work, like she can see her baby in the crib, right? And she's in the office pumping while watching him sleep. So there's different ways, technologies now that can certainly help with that.
Okay, so good
I was
piece.
gonna say, we always say a picture and a playlist, right? If there's a song that reminds you of your baby, and you got that picture, and that emotional pull, I think, is always super helpful. So.
Well, wonderful. I don't know if everyone can see it on their screen the way that we can, but a whopping 53% of you said that your family was supportive, but that still leaves the other 47, 33 that said no, and 13 that said it was not applicable. So yeah, there's a way to go there, right? And so there's a way to really talk. And I think we'll kind of maybe circle back a little bit to talking about some strategies to build that village, to increase awareness. I have a question for you, Mia, here though. And someone says in the chat, says, how do I prevent my nipples from feeling dry and scaly after each breastfeeding session?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things, right? There are different nipple creams that you can use in order to help, especially with the dry piece, because sometimes you start to crack and it's not a great feeling, and then you're like trying to pump, or like the baby is going to suck on your boob and you're like, that hurts, we need to stop, right? I will also always recommend alternating, so don't always go immediately to one side, because again, that constant is a lot, and we're not robotic, we're not robots. We need to take time to heal our bodies, because we are still going through a process, right? And we need to give ourselves time to heal. I don't know why I keep doing this. The weird thing that
you
I'm
do that
doing
at
right
work
now.
all the time.
Just like just move, it's fine. And then I would also say there are like some nipple pads that you can put on also to like keep, that friction again between, like, after the friction between your body and like your bra, or your body and a t-shirt, right? So just keeping those things in mind. But there are a bunch of different types of nipple creams. I try not to promote like one brand over the other, but you figure out what works for you and for your body. But that would be my suggestion. I don't know, Larissa, if you have a better talks, but those are the things that I know work for me. Is what we recommend for our moms. So yeah, just keeping up that nipple health is it's important. It's important, and we don't talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so I've heard different things, and I'm curious, Larissa, in your professional opinion. People say different kind of creams and oils. So I've heard coconut oil, olive oil. Are any of those myths that people should avoid, or any of those actually true that they should use? Because I know, here we are with this lots of misinformation in this space.
Right.
So.
We have at my facility discussed using olive oil on nipples, help a lot of things. If there's a milk bleb, it can help with healing. Um, that's one thing. I know a lot of the nipple creams have olive oil in them. So that's been shown for sure to be something natural and helpful.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know, because I think one of those things that we have to consider too is someone will say, use this great cream, and then you get there and it's $45. And so if someone can grab, the bottle of olive oil they already have in the house, let's help them out, right?
Yep.
So we've got another question, and this is, I think, an interesting one, because this is another space where I feel like a lot of misinformation is given back and forth in both directions. And so another attendee asks, besides breastfeeding every 2 to 3 hours, what specific foods and supplements should I be consuming to increase my milk supply?
Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about a newborn, of course, the consistency, 8 to 12 times a day, you're going to hear us say that a million times. If we have a mom who's having an issue with milk supply, first of all, the foundation of that, it could be hormonal, and those foods are not going to do anything for her, right? And so one is finding out what is going on, the foundation of the low milk supply. And secondly, there are foods out there that have been shown to that could help increase milk supply. I know a lot of people always go for oatmeal, right? And green leafy vegetables. But I was doing a little reading, and there's no hardcore information about oatmeal. What it has been shown or kind of linked to is increase in oxytocin, right? Which is the love hormone that helps with milk release. And so I was reading that, and if we eat oatmeal and it makes us feel good, grits make me feel good too. So if I'm eating something that's helping me relax and feel well, go for it. They always tell us green leafy vegetables, right? They point to spinach and arugula. Eat your collard greens. That they don't list collard greens on nobody's list as far as helping milk supply, but it is in the same category as your spinach and everything else. So again, that's culturally, right? Culturally, we should be looking at things that could be tailored to us. If you tell me you're gonna make me some smoked turkey legs, some black eyed peas, and collard greens, and that can help my milk supply, win Sunday dinner, I'm there, right? So yes, there are foods, there are even supplements that can help increase milk supply, but a lot of it is work, right? You can take all the supplements and eat all the oatmeal you want, but if you're not nursing adequately or pumping adequately and keeping those breasts stimulated, those foods aren't going to do much for you. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Did you have anything to add, Mia?
Nope. I just want to know what dinner is, if that's what we're eating.
Okay, so then I guess conversely, because I think this is an important question too, is there hard evidence for any foods that you actually should avoid, though? Are there sort of milk killers, as we could maybe call them?
So peppermint, spearmint, where a lot of us are into oils and things like that. Those have been shown that could reduce or impact milk supply. A lot of times when women are wanting to dry up their milk, those are some of the things that we recommend that they massage and rub with. Medications, right? A lot colds and flu season. A lot of moms question an allergy season, right? Benadryl and things like that. If a medication is going to dry up sinuses, they can also dry up milk ducts and sinuses. So in teaching and education about that, I'm not going to tell you that you can't take it, but you do have to know to protect your milk supply. If you're exclusively breastfeeding, you may have to throw a couple of pump sessions in there in order to protect your supply. So not only are there, some foods that have been shown to impact it, but also medications as well.
Okay, so good to know. So maybe if it dries up other liquids body produces, it might be related. That's that's a very solid and good piece of advice. So kind of circling back to the other part of the question, because none other audience questions have come up in the chat. What do you think in terms of how do we as a community? So I think one of the interesting things we were saying is if you have that community support, right, and you see your mom doing it, you see your sister and you see your cousin, right, you're more likely to embrace this journey. And that just makes sense as simple logic, right, in one way or another. But as we have situations where people, and we had a good 33% of the audience who said, right, they didn't have that family support, right? How do we maybe harness technology and social media and some of these other things as a way to increase that awareness, to build that community, and to support mothers? Do we have some ideas as to how we actually do that?
I mean, that's what I was going to say. I think we have to, there's a piece of it where I think we have to kind of divorce ourselves from this idea of what traditional family looks like, right? Like, not for nothing, I think we all can agree that we have not done all the things that our mama told us to do. Amen.
Amen.
I think that we can all agree that there are things that we do that our mom is like, I would never. Okay, sis. Like, but I think, how do you find family in other spaces? How do you find community in other spaces, right? Maybe your mom is not on board, maybe your aunties and everybody, maybe they don't get it, but your best friend does. And she knows people who, right? And like maybe, your best friend and your mom, all of them don't get it, but there are community groups on all of the places, on all the social medias, and you got to mind for it and look for it and all of those things. But there is support out there for you. If we just sometimes we got to look outside of that traditional space, and guess what? It's okay. That's still your mama, and that's still Big Mama and them, and we can still love them to pieces and go eat dinner on Sunday. But it's okay if people don't agree with the choice that you make for yourself and your family, but you still get to stand 10 toes on that choice. And that's fine. Maybe you're the first, and maybe you starting a new tradition in the family. Maybe you the only, and maybe you starting a new tradition in the family, right? It's okay to step outside of that box and step outside of, frankly, that trauma space that tells us that we are not worthy of having the same things that other people have. We are not worthy of, providing for our families in the same way that other people get that promotion. You might not ever see yourself on, the news, or you might not ever see yourself in commercials doing this thing. And it doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you don't have that opportunity. And it doesn't mean that there's not support out there for you to go on this journey. So I just divorcing ourselves from this idea that if your mama say it's not a good idea, then it must not be a good idea. Child, you wasn't listening to your mom when you was 15. Don't start now. You like, come on, what we doing? what are we doing? What are our barriers?
Do you want to add to that, Larsa? Or?
No, I absolutely agree. And it's amazing some of the support groups that are out there who are tailored just for you. If you are 40 and breastfeeding and a new mom, there's a support group for you, for 40-year-old women breastfeeding new mom. Like, you can really tailor your support system if you would give your chance the opportunity to get outside that box.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. And I think it's building the village, finding the village, right? It's not necessarily going to be the one that you're born into. And I think that's important to remember. And so, empowering people to say, okay, well, this was the narrative for everyone else, and I can change that narrative too. And I think that's part of understanding the legacy, that's part of understanding, how we've gotten here. And once you do that, well, you see, maybe I don't need to continue going down this road, right? And that's a big thing. One of the other things that I found in doing the research, which, it's funny, you have real life experiences and then you do research and you're kind of like, well, I wasn't crazy. And so they, found that when they surveyed many lactation consultants, and many of them, who do not look like us, right, were reported as spending less time with Black mothers because, quote unquote, they weren't going to feed anyways, they weren't going to breastfeed anyways, so why waste my time? And so one of the things that I think would be interesting to explore would be, how do we increase that sort of cultural competency? How do we increase that addressing of these sort of implicit biases that a lot of the quote unquote professionals meant to help people in this space actually have? And I wonder, both of you working in the hospital setting, have you seen this? Have you encountered this kind of pushback? And how do you feel that you're able to address, some of the discrepancies you've seen, and how do you help a mom who may just feel less supported? And what do we say to these professionals to kind of change this narrative?
Yeah. Mia, you want to start?
I'm happy to. I think, first and foremost, I think that education in our spaces has to be required and not optional, right? Because you cannot support people who are in active trauma spaces. A hospital is an active trauma space. I don't care why you're going. It is an active trauma space. You cannot support people if you are not informed on what that trauma looks like, feels like, sounds like for them, and if you are not equipped to support them, right? And so not being equipped means that I am a person who believes that I don't have any biases. I treat everybody the same. You are not equipped to support people in this space, right? It also means accountability in our spaces. When we have lactation specialists who we've said the thing, we've done the thing, we've, tried to bring them on the journey, and they don't want to do it, guess what? You don't have to. You also can't stay here, right? So I think that we have to figure out in our spaces what it really does look like to be equitable and trauma informed in the care that we are giving people, the care that they are receiving. Because if you have made up a story in your mind that I don't want, right, that I'm not going to do, or that I don't deserve, you're never going to be able to help me, support me. A lot of times people in our spaces don't feel seen, right? And if you don't see me, you're not going to hear me for what? You've taken away my voice, you've taken away my physical, right? You don't see me, you don't hear me, but I'm supposed to believe that you're going to save me, that you're going to support me, that you're going to help me. And so, the idea of eracism is real. It's not just racism in a space that prevents people from having equitable outcomes. It's the erasure of our history. It is the erasure of our history from education, and not just saying, well, we did the training, we checked the box. Okay, what's the accountability measure that goes with that? Right. And when people don't want to change, again, they don't have to, but they can't stay and continue to inflict harm on people just because they want to. And so we really have to be way more intentional about holding ourselves to the highest standard. Cultural competency is not just something that we get to claim, the same way that allyship and accomplishhood is not something you just get to claim for yourself and say, well, I did the thing, I'm fine. If I am telling you that my experience in this space is not that, then we have to be accountable to that. We got to listen and believe people, and then cater our care to what their experience is and has been of us historically and in the present.
Yep, I absolutely agree. I want to add to that, though, a lot is not going to change at the bottom if the top doesn't believe it. right? If the top doesn't believe in what the patients are telling them in their experience, there is nothing that's going to change on the ground floor with those healthcare providers taking care of those patients and those moms. And accountability has to start there. Like I cannot leave this conversation without you guys and the audience understanding my position. Here in Southern Indiana, where I live, the ratio to Black to white is 1 to 8. Okay. We don't hold a very large Black space here in this community. So you can imagine how many Black women are delivering at the hospital in the suburbs, right? Mm-hmm. And I have had people complain to me about how they were treated by the lactation consultant. Basically peeks her head in the door, how's it going? I give my answer, okay, call if you need something. Or really just giving verbal instruction and not asking for permission to touch the patient and to help in a more physical way. I have had patients, my cousin, complain about that, right? They didn't know it was my cousin, but you know what I'm saying? It's hard. It's very difficult. I don't know what your demographics are like or where you guys live, but when I tell you, it is hard here in Southern Indiana, and not just the region. We also house a formula company, one of the biggest makers of formula. So you can imagine that the popularity of formula on top of systemic racism, on top of bigotry. I mean, there was, I'll just say there was an employee who basically flat out said, I'm not going to get donor breast milk for that same-sex couple. She still got a job.
That part.
It's hard. It is hard, y'all. Like we're here talking. It's difficult. Yeah. I mean, in real life. And so that's me as a professional. I can't imagine what these women are going through just in their everyday walk and trying to provide and be the best for their babies and families.
Well, I can tell you in the city of New York, in the year, so whatever the ratio is there, I don't know, but it's certainly meant to be better than Indiana, I guess. So in the city of New York in the year 2020, spent 109 days in the NICU and never saw a single lactation professional that looked a thing like me. So if we want to just talk about, I think nationwide and people will tell you stories, and some of the things that I heard, even in an environment that I think is supposed to be quite different in the sense of its training and its cultural competency and its exposure. There were still quite a few stories and quite a few moments that we encountered as a family itself. And so I think that speaks to it, that across the country, right, across the demographics, across the nation, you've got people in some of the most diverse cities in the country and some of the least diverse, all experiencing the same thing, right? All experiencing
heartbreaking
similar situations. And so that tells us that we've got quite a ways to go, right?
Because I would like, when you're talking about demographics, like here in the big old city of St. Louis, right? We in the big city. Here in St. Louis, our population is probably 50-50, right? The story of race in St. Louis is pretty 50-50 Black and white. That population inside that hospital, though, very different. Specifically in our NICU space, the population of Black to white is very, very different than the population in, for our city. There are way more Black babies in that NICU than there are white babies. Okay, great. And when my son was in that NICU 14 years ago, there were 0 Black lactation specialists. What do you think that the number is on today in the year of our Lord 2023? That same 0. It's the same
Wow.
zero, right? The same exact zero. And so when we talk about this idea of like people being allowed to let their biases permeate the medicine, right? But then you'll have people talk, well, you know, we've made so much progress. It's a yes and. It is a yes and, because
Yep.
the population outside the walls of our hospital should be reflective in our spaces through our nursing staff, through our senior leadership, through all of those things. It should be, right? We should be able to see ourselves, because there's always this conversation about representation, and it gets hijacked because it's like, well, you're trying to say that only Black people can take care of Black people. No, I'm saying that it's a safety issue when I don't feel represented in your space. When I look into your space and I only see myself in housekeeping and in food services, you're telling me how I matter in this space to you. That's what representation is. You are telling me how I matter in this space to you. Where are the Black doctors? Where are the Black nurses? Where are the Black lactation specialists, RTs, PT? Where are these people who are in these roles that are supposed to be helping support this family? And if I never see anybody that looks like me, how am I really supposed to feel like you understand, that you've even taken steps to try to learn? Because you don't even have to interact with me on a professional level. And I'm supposed to believe that you want to interact with me. Like, you don't have colleagues, so you don't have that practice, and you're not exercising the muscle there. So I'm supposed to believe that when you leave here, all of a sudden you around all the Black people and you're exercising the muscles somewhere else, right? You won't even come in the room and talk to me because you're nervous around Black people. You're nervous. You don't
Yep.
know how mom is going to react. Are you nervous to go talk to this other room? Are you worried about how she going to react? Or are you good to go? Right? I just have a question. I got a question just like everybody else. And there's no harm in it. But if you're afraid of me before you even come in to help me, how, like, what do we, who, child? Listen, in the big city
We
of
need a
St. Louis,
support group.
in the old city of St. Louis.
Whew.
Well, I think as we've probably got about 5 minutes left, and I'd like to leave people.
No.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we're coming close to our hour, and I think we could probably talk for a year. And I think it's one of those topics because there is so much to be said. I wanted to answer one more question that's come into the chat, and then kind of circle back with any last thoughts anyone had. And so, we've got a mom here, and she's saying that she's a breastfeeding new mom of a 1-month-old, and she's noticed that she's developed face acne and body odor, that deodorant is failing. And she wants to know if anyone else has experienced these things. Is it normal? Are there any tips as to get back to your quote unquote normal?
So I would say hormonally related. Lot of, I mean, this baby, we're not even back to baseline. We're nursing, we're kicking all these hormones up. And so, yes, it is totally normal. Absolutely totally normal for these things to kind of get out of whack. I would talk to your physician, possibly look for more natural type of there's a difference between deodorants and antiperspirants, right? Kind of doing homework and research on what you need for yourself. But please, 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 please know that it is totally normal. It is normal for things to be out of whack, and it is hormone related.
Yes, 1000%.
So I think I'm curious, because I think we've gotten to that, addressing a lot of the problems, addressing a lot of the things, but I'd want to kind of say, how do we go forward? How do we change this narrative? How do we advocate for that increased representation? How do we advocate to changing that narrative, to having people say, hey, guess what? This mother deserves the same fair crack at being able to nourish her child in what we know is the healthiest way possible, right? How do we go forward?
I feel like the most powerful thing I can do is each one teach one. If I can make a ripple effect to different mothers, moms, aunties, cousins in this community, that's how we're going to expand really our strength in being able to have a voice in getting these things to change. It's terrifying to be the only African American person who works in your department and needing to file a complaint for, racial slurs. It ain't gonna be too hard to figure out who made the complaint, right?
Here.
So finding your strength, and if we can do that in numbers, that's going to be a way to change the narrative. And again, holding people accountable for how they act, what they say and do in those spaces. And I would encourage moms to speak up. There are surveys in every hospital that need to and should be filled out and completed. Because if they're not telling the story, no one's ever going to know, and things are not going to change on that end. And just know and understand that we're here. We're here to support you, anything that you need. This is not about, for me, it's not just about breastfeeding and lactation. I am teaching parenting care. I am teaching, there's so many skills that come with this calling. I won't even say it's a job that come with this purpose. And so just for people to know we're here, get this ripple effect, get together and strengthen numbers, and have a voice.
I mean, and I would just say, it's your choice. It is your choice how you want to support and love on your family and that baby. That is your choice. And I know it might feel, we're talking and we're making it sound simple. You don't need anybody's cosign to do what's right for your baby. You just don't. Whatever you need, there are people who are out there who are ready, willing, and able to give you the support that you need, the encouragement that you need. That if you want a cosign, we're here. We're co-signing it. Everything that you're feeling is normal. You're exhausted. That's normal. Your body is going through changes. That's normal. You're nervous. That's normal, right? You don't need any specific person to tell you that you are good enough, not in no hospital space, not in your family space. You get to choose. The autonomy of that decision is yours. And whatever you choose is the right choice for you to make. And you don't need to feel bad about it. You don't need to be ashamed of it. People have been feeding their babies this way for eons. Okay? It is, when we talk about the things that your body was made to do, this is one of them. So if you want to do it, go do it and be proud of the choice that you make and stand 10 toes down. And if you need people, you got people. We people, we're here. So, just
We
make
outside.
We outside. That's the thing this year, Black Breastfeeding Week. We are outside. There are people who have your back, and it is okay to choose this for your family, even if nobody else has done it. You get to choose your body, legit your choice. That's your baby. Do what you want for your baby.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful parting thought to say, right? And at the end of the day, understanding that trust your instincts, trust your guts, trust what they don't call it, mom's intuition for nothing, right? And I think there's so many things that would work against people saying, oh well, there's a reason to doubt, there's a reason to question. No, and ask for the help too, right? So even though it might be the most natural thing that your body's ever done, you might need help doing it, and don't feel that because you need help doing it you're somehow failing. You are going to always serve your child best by asking for help, asking for guidance, and asking for support, because you're understanding that you're trying your best. And just by asking, you are being a fantastic parent, right? And I think that's such a big piece of it. And so I wanted to thank our panelists I wanted to thank everyone who participated in the chat and listened to us today. I invite you to please follow Birthing the Magic on Instagram. You will be able to see the wonderful panels and workshops we've got upcoming in the next few months. Also, the full recording of this will be available on the YouTube channel. And so if someone is beginning this journey and they missed out on some piece of it or part of it, know that they can go back and find all of the programming that was done this week as well. And we want you to share the resource, right? And so if it's not you that's having the baby now, but it's the lady down the street or the cousin or the aunt somewhere else, that is, that's the way to be the village. It's like the neighborhood watch, right? So if you see something that everyone else should know about, send up the alarm, ring that bell and say, this is what I've heard and this is what I've seen. And we are out here. Thank you all.
Yeah,
And you have a beautiful and wonderful evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We're going to need a part 2 and 3.
Yeah. Part 17.
All right. Y'all have a blessed night.